Do you want an automated flow of clients coming to your business with little or no energy on your part, or little or no time or effort? Well, that might sound like a pipe dream, but it's something that is entirely possible when you run Facebook ads to a webinar. And that's what we're going to focus on today, and really focusing in on how to start building your webinar step by step. I'm going to walk you through all this week, kind of the various different components that you should think about it. I'm not going to do it in sequential order. I'm actually going to do it as a copywriter, how I work at it with my clients. I'm going to start with the most important thing first, which is what we'll cover today. And then as we go along, give you the subsequent steps on how, I kind of think about like, okay, once we've done this, let's do this. Let's do this. So it's not necessarily the webinar, how the webinar is sequenced, but it's really in terms of putting in that effort and time into creating a webinar and kind of bringing together the puzzle pieces to make sure that your webinar is converting. And that's how you're really doing it, using Facebook ads that are properly put together to generate that interest and curiosity, and using that webinar to take prospects and turning them into raving fans and ultimately end clients along the way. So if this is the first time joining one of my lives, I am Brian Czekanski, and I work with coaches on cracking the code on Facebook ads to accelerate their growth and impact while cutting their work hours in half. So one of the best ways to do it, and I've kind of seen it time and time again, I've seen it for my own business, but also for clients' businesses, they kind of cross that meridian line where, for a long period of time, they're, kind of building up their business. They're working hard. They're doing all the things. They're creating content. They're doing all this networking, all those kind of things. And they're slowly burning themselves out. It's kind of the process of why a lot of businesses fail. It's really in that kind of year one, year two. They're just trying to find those consistent strategies that really work for them so that they can get that steady flow of clients, really get those clients the result that they're looking for, and then go out there and use those results to get even more. But once once you get past that line where you can start using Facebook ads written in the right way, and then take them to a webinar and start flowing it that way, a recorded webinar that you can put up any time of the day. People can go through that, get to know you, get to know what your offer is all about, and sign up right away. Or in the case of a lot of coaches that I work with, it goes to an application where they get on the call with them. And again, but a lot of these prospects are already pre-sold. They've been through your webinar. They're already excited about the offer. They already know a lot about that coach even before that. So it becomes less like a sales call and more of a qualifying process for a lot of these coaches to make sure that that client is, a good fit for them, but also ready and willing to take the action that they need to get to the outcome that they're looking for the most. So let's kind of jump in. So again, in terms of actually writing the Facebook ads and getting to that webinar, again, you have to think about it a little bit differently in that in these Facebook ads, what we're really generating curiosity for is kind of like a master class, a training where people are going to get educated. They're going to kind of discover a lot of different secrets to that outcome that they want the most. So within your Facebook ads, you really have to be using those different frameworks that I talked about. Again, go into fullconfidenceads.com, where I really focus on kind of the writing of that Facebook ads, how to actually manage and create them, and how to optimize them over time. So I'm not going to talk a lot about Facebook ads today. I'm really going to focus on that webinar today and for the rest of the week, and really getting you into the right mindset and the right kind of structure to actually convert those people. Once you have those Facebook ads, we're getting leads to our webinar. How do we get them to the point where they're ready to buy along the way? So the number one thing that I focus on, even before we start to think about the webinar script or anything else, is thinking about like, what is the hook of our webinar? What is that specific outcome that our specific audience wants the most? That's really going to be implanted on their mind. It's something that we can reference in our Facebook ads to generate that curiosity. It's something that we might have if you have a story-based Facebook ad, you can start to tease that out a little bit in your Facebook ad. But the number one thing that we have to use is kind of a carrot for people to go along in that webinar. And one of the things that we want to use from the very start, in that first 30 to 60 seconds, I usually, have it out there is like, what is that unique promise that we can put out there? What is that outcome that we want our audience to know that generates enough curiosity that's really specific? But, again, kind of brings them to the very end of the presentation as well. Like it's something that they are just hungry to learn. It's something that piques their interest. They're just like, I have to continue going through this, whatever it is, 60 to 90 minutes to learn what it's all about and how it's absolutely possible for me and my business or me and my life or whatever it is, whatever kind of coaching or audience you have out there. So really goes beyond just, putting out there and selling your services. Again, very similar to a sales page headline. We want to be not only selling our services, but selling the outcome of our services. And that's really what the hook or the promise or the goal is all about. As you think about it in that webinar, it's like, okay, what is that thing that we can put out there that they've never heard of before, that really gets them excited? Something that, again, if you can put a time frame in there, and I'll go through in terms of a checklist that, in terms of what I've seen that you can kind of go through in terms of not only your sales headline, but also the webinar hook or the goal or the promise, whatever you want to call it, something that you can kind of say within a short sentence that really, again, kind of gets imprinted in their mind, and they're getting curious, like, okay, like, how is that all possible? Especially along the way where you're providing proof and kind of backing up that claim and kind of building their interest and beliefs along the way. I want to make sure that strong outcome in the very beginning is something that we can mention really quickly. So I spent a lot of time on that. Excuse me. Like I spend a lot of time with my clients kind of drumming up, like, what are those what's that key phrase that we can put out there? And there's a couple of different ways that you can come up with it. Again, think about it in your own life. What's kind of within your specific business, especially if I work with a lot of coaches that are, have kind of gone through the same problems that their audience has, and they've been through a transformation, and they're really coming back for that audience and taking them by the hand and saying, let me help you experience the same transformation. So, they've kind of been in their prospect's shoes before. So we think about their own life and their own career and things like that. And what are those big accomplishments that they've been able to achieve? And how do they help their own, clients achieve that same transformation? So kind of list out, like, okay, if you've been on that same path that your prospects are going on, like, what are those specific claims that you've been able to achieve in your own life? Can we write them out? What are those big, enormous accomplishments that you have? Like maybe it's a money number. Maybe it's something from a personal, like, again, it's just relevant to what you're coaching for. Maybe it's a health promise. Maybe it's a business promise. Whatever it is that your audience really cares about and what your coaching is all about. That's where we want to kind of list out those list of things that you've been able to achieve, and think about, like, what is that time frame that you were able to achieve them? What were some of those things that you went through to get to that goal along the way? What were some of those hurdles? What were some of those challenges? Because many times your audience is going through the same thing. So we go through that for for my own coaches, clients, and kind of list out their accomplishments. And then we, take a look at, and we go through all their best clients. Like, what are those, what are those success stories that kind of blow your mind in terms of accomplishments? And we list them all out and see what's possible. And we use, again, as much as possible, video testimonials to go out to those best clients, build out some case studies, and actually get in their own words what they were able to accomplish. And, again, it's much as possible, we want to be speaking our audience's language, because, again, say you're a doctor, for example, or a medical coach or a health coach, and you have a lot of, kind of that jargon in there that doesn't really fit with your audience, you're going to kind of your promise is going to go right over their head. So I want to be speaking in their language. Again, that's why it's really helpful to kind of go out to your most successful clients, ask them for a video testimonial, so we have the exact words and phrases that they would use to describe all the things that they've been able to accomplish and how fast they've been able to accomplish them along the way. So that's really helpful. And then we think about, like, the other thing I'll do is kind of take a look at what the competition is going out there and doing. Again, if your top competition is going out there and using webinars to get people to sign up with them, I'm going to take a look at what promises are they putting out there. What things are they saying within their Facebook ads? What promises are absolutely out? Like, what hooks are they using? Again, the idea is that you can come up with a great hook, but if you're speaking the same phrases and the same words that all your competition is, and your audience is kind of seeing that same thing everywhere, it's going to dilute the effect of that. It's going to dilute the curiosity that they have, and it'll just be like, okay, yeah, I've heard this. I've heard this 37 times. Like, I don't need to join your webinar to hear the same sales pitch along the way. So it really has to be differentiated versus the rest of your competition, and really connecting it to some kind of unique formula, unique mechanism that we'll get into later in the week. But really thinking about, like, what is that hook or outcome that your audience wants the most? How can we describe it in their own words? And how can we go through these things along the way? So again, similar to kind of headlines on a sales page, it's really important to kind of think about a couple of different things. And the best way I've kind of seen this laid out is by Stephen Georgi's RMBC method. Which I highly recommend, but I kind of want to walk through some of the checklists that he has in terms of a headline. It really is super relevant in terms of that webinar outcome that you're putting out from in front of your audience in the first 30, 60, or first couple of minutes of your webinar to really get them get them excited, get enough curiosity. So the first thing is, number one, curiosity. Like, again, putting in an outcome statement that they've never heard before. It's not being said by all their competitors. It's completely differentiated. It's something brand new. It's not something that's just being regurgitated by the rest of the industry and things like that. So again, this is where, like, doing your competitive research and actually figuring out, like, what is everybody else saying and how can I say something differently? Maybe the speed of result is something different. Maybe I can put out a bigger promise. Maybe I can talk about all those things that they don't enjoy doing, or maybe some result is getting that, maybe some type of unique formula is getting them results, but there's a lot of pain points involved there, and you can talk about how your process has designed to help them get better results faster without having to deal with some of those things that they hate doing. So number one is curiosity. Again, that's kind of a requirement for any kind of sales page headline or webinar type of outcome that you're putting out there. If there's not enough curiosity, people aren't going to continue to watch. They're not going to continue to go through your presentation. They want to be, use that curiosity as kind of that carrot to get people on the way. The second one, again, is not something that you always need, but it is relevant for in some points. It's number two, kind of like calling out their pain point. Like, what are they dealing with right now? Whether it's weight loss or personal development issues or things like that. So in certain instances, it's relevant to focus on that pain point. In other instances, in terms of that outcome, it's just all about kind of future pacing, like helping them visualize what their life is going to be like once they, buy your product or get on that call with you post the webinar and go through your program and get to the other side. So again, calling out the pain point isn't always necessary, but can be really helpful within an outcome statement on the webinar. Again, that kind of gets you to number three, which is really promising a solution. This is really what you're going to tend to have on every webinar outcome statement is like, okay, what's that solution on the other side? Again, we're not going to promise any, we're not going to focus on the service that we provide. We're going to focus on the outcome of that service and start to allow our audience to kind of visualize what it's going to look like. Number four is all about specificity. So again, how specific can we be? Again, we want a big, bold promise, but we want to have as much detail in there. We want to have a level of sophistication and specificity so that people, the belief continues to rise, and you make it more tangible for people. So it's not all about, think about a headline that might say, how to lose weight. Well, that's not as curiosity inducing versus like how to lose 37 pounds in the next 17 days. Okay, that generates a lot more curiosity because it's more specific. It sounds like something that kind of ties into that unique mechanism that we talked about, that we'll talk about in future days. And it generates that curiosity. It makes it more believable. It's more tangible. It's right in front of them, and it kind of, again, bleeds in and teases out some of the process that you're going to talk about. Number five is all about simplicity. So how do we kind of make your promise super simple, where they don't have to think about it. They really just get excited about it. You raise the curiosity. They know they want it right away, and there's not a lot of questions. There's not a lot of objections. There's not a lot of questioning or things like that in terms of the overall outcome. So making sure that it's super simple in their exact language, like how would they describe it? Again, that's why it's really helpful to do your research in terms of your audience. Go out and get those video or audio testimonials so you can hear it directly from your best clients and really speak their language as much as possible. Number six, again, when you're putting out big, bold promises and things like that, this is really important, especially, if you have a sales page and things like that, and the subheadline and things like that, in terms of credibility, addressing skepticism, all those kind of things. So it's not altogether possible on a webinar outcome statement, but sometimes it is. How can we kind of knock down some of that skepticism that they might have, especially when you're putting out a big claim? That obviously raises questions along the time. So, in your outcome statement, can you address some of that skepticism right away? May or may not be possible, but just something to consider, especially in that. It's probably a little bit more relevant, especially thinking about kind of that subheadline on your sales page as much as possible. And it's something that you're going to continue to do within your webinar script as you go along, kind of providing proof that knocks down any objections or skepticism, but just something to think about as you think about that outcome statement and that hook that you have in the beginning. And then the last one is really a time frame to achieve results. So again, like if you can put out a big, bold promise and, if people think about it, it's like, okay, like maybe that is possible, but it's going to take me 3 or 5 years. Again, an easy way to kind of raise that curiosity really quickly is to not only put out a big result, but let people know kind of that speed of result, like how accelerated can we get people along the way, and how can we get them there quickly, faster than anybody else is promising it along the way. So you might have other people that have different variations of that outcome, but if you can get them there even faster, again, that raises that curiosity. And again, it might, you might have a big, bold promise, and just the fact that you can get somebody there even quicker and they can save time, money, stress, all those kind of things. That might be the one thing that keeps them on the webinar even longer, kind of questioning, like, how is this result even possible? Like, kind of explain how that's possible and as you go along. So again, kind of feeding into the unique mechanism, unique formula that we'll talk about tomorrow in terms of it really being important. So you have that kind of big, bold promise that you have in the very beginning. You have where they're sitting right now and kind of connecting the two and kind of building that new belief pattern in what they're trying to do. So again, in terms of, the most important thing as part of your webinar is kind of thinking about that outcome statement, building up that curiosity so they stay along the way, where you can kind of inform them and kind of build up the belief of how that promise is possible, providing proof along the way to do that as well. So again, spend a lot of time in terms of, what you've been able to accomplish only in your career, or whatever is relevant for your business, thinking about your best customers, what have they been able to accomplish, taking a look at the competition as well. Like, how can you differentiate yourself from the promises that are out there? How can you get people a faster result? How can you get people a bigger result? All those things kind of feed into that specific outcome. And then along the way, one of the things I love to do, and one of the things I would advise you to do, is do some split testing along the way. So you might have, I usually come up with maybe 4 different variations of that webinar outcome or that webinar hook, goal, whatever you want to call it. And then I'd run a traffic campaign on Facebook and see, like, okay, among my specific audience, like, which is the one that really resonates? Which is the one that people are clicking on more than the rest of them? That kind of gives you a level of satisfaction in going in your webinar, like, okay, this is more likely to work because I've tested out various different headlines that are out there. I know among the various different things that I tested, this one outperformed the rest of them by a wide margin. Kind of playing around with the words as well can be just really helpful. It might be just kind of putting one word first makes all the difference in terms of really catching your audience's attention. So really think about, like, okay, in kind of coming up with your headlines, coming up with those webinar outcomes, how can we go out to the market and actually test it before you start to build all the components of your webinar? Because again, if that hook doesn't really capture your audience's attention, they're more likely to drop in those first couple minutes. And even if the rest of your presentation is completely amazing, you're this amazing presenter, you transform your audience. But if there's not as many people there, obviously that's going to lower your conversion rates over time, and you're just not going to have as successful results. So again, it all starts with having that, that big outcome in the beginning. Again, in the first 30 or 60 seconds, can we put that out there to really capture your audience's attention? Let them know what this webinar is all about, what you're going to cover, and using that really short sentence. Again, very similar to a headline on a sales page to capture their curiosity, to get them scrolling down the page. That's exactly what we're trying to do on the webinar as well, is keep their attention, keep them to the end where you can put out your specific offer, or in many cases, in me working with coaches, how can we get them to an application and eventually to a call where we can start to qualify them and get them into one of our specific programs, or group program, or one-on-one, or whatever it is. So hope that was helpful. Again, kind of day one in terms of laying out the webinar. But again, this is one that I kind of spend the most amount of time with my clients to make sure that we get it right. And then we can start to build the rest of the building blocks along the way. So tomorrow, I'm really going to focus on how do we build on that outcome statement that we've come up with? How do we kind of build out our unique formula? Again, the unique formula is all about like where your audience is right now, and that that big webinar outcome statement that we put out there. How do we bridge the gap between the two? Is really by building up that belief and kind of mentioning that unique mechanism and how it's all possible, and kind of building that out throughout the webinar. So with that, let me know below any of the comments, let me know in terms of webinar outcome statements that you're potentially considering testing out over the next few months. And into 2022, can help you with some of the wordsmithing there. If this was helpful, hit that like button, share to anybody that's considering creating a webinar, and check out my opt-in full confidence ads, all about kind of driving more and more interest to your Facebook ads. And check out the rest of the lives throughout the week, as I'll kind of break down the various different stages of webinars and what you have to think about as you build out the various pieces.